Hey guys, it's Ryan here with Hobbies of Man once again, and today we're doing the first of our top 5 videos for 2024. I usually do top 3, top 5, and then top 10, but this year, just because I've been focusing mostly on series, all 3 of them are going to be top 5s because I've read less variety but more depth, if that makes sense. So today we're looking at top 5 novels of 2024. There's going to be a bit of a recency bias here, just because that's how it always goes, but there's also going to be a pretty understandable kind of concept, which is that I've only really read 5 or 6 or maybe 7, if you really stretch it out a bit, series this year, and I have 5 slots. So most of the series that I've read will be mentioned in some way. The only one that I think I don't mention at all is Primogenitor Saga, and that's just because I didn't really like the 3rd volume, but it is what it is. So we'll go in reverse order. We'll start at the bottom at number 5, and then we'll make it all the way to the top. But if you know me, if you've seen any of my videos, you probably know which one is at my top this year. So let's just jump into it. So first off, at number 5, we have Kraken Rider Z. This is a recent book that I've read, and mostly, even though the story is really great, there are some slight issues with it, right? Mostly the fact that the first bit of it, the prologue, is a bit clunky for my taste. It's a bit difficult to kind of get into, and then it takes a long time, basically up until the end of the book, for you to understand what the prologue was about, right? So I think on a reread, the prologue will be much better. The thing is that as a first-time reader, that's not good, right? So that's kind of the only reason why it didn't end up higher. But for me, Kraken Rider Z is a pretty important book because of the aspect that it deals with a character, a human or human-esque character, who also has an animal companion. When I started reading this was a few days after my parents let me and my sister know that our family dog had passed away. She was old and 15 years old, and she was a little Yorkie, so her heart just gave out, and she passed away in her sleep, taking a nap during the day. And, well, the thing is that is very sad and disheartening. And at this point in time, I'm mostly okay, right? I'm mostly over it. I don't immediately start crying every time I see a dog or every time I think about her. But it was a very difficult process, especially when I went home over the Thanksgiving holiday and realized that our house was immensely lonely and quiet because my little dog wasn't barking anymore, right? So I read Kraken Rider Z a few days after my dog passed away, or a few days after my parents told us that my dog passed away, which had been about a week or so after she did. And I really loved the early part of Kraken Rider Z. I mean, I think that the later parts are obviously way more cool and intense because they have actual fight sequences and stuff, but there is something really beautiful about the way that our character Z interacts with the animals that he takes care of, because he's a little farm boy and he rides around on a little pig called Midge, right? Actually, I think she's a really big pig, and Midge is a pretty intelligent creature, and so she and Z have a good relationship. And it's pretty fun and meaningful, and it reminded me a lot of my dog, even though my dog is a really tiny dog, was a really tiny dog. I remember that there was always this really fun kind of concept where we would realize that she was a much more intelligent creature than we would initially think, right? And it was always a fun kind of concept. And so that was really interesting in that sense. But when Z meets the Kraken, Jessup, and he gives him a name and stuff, reminded me a lot of when we bought our dog. And with her memory kind of very clearly in my mind at that time, those interactions meant a lot to me, and they really helped me deal with some of my grief by giving me a positive version of it, right? If that makes sense. I'm not really sure how to explain it, but I connected with this pretty well. So I really, really enjoyed Kraken Rider Z. I can't wait for book 2. That should be next year in January. And if I manage to read it in January, I'll do a review of it by February. So keep an eye out for that. Moving on to number 4, we have Legends and Lattes, specifically the first book, although I am talking about the whole series. So Legends and Lattes. The reason for this is actually pretty similar. I had been interested in this book for a while. I knew that it was written by the guy that does the voices for the Cradle Audible, like the audio book, right? And I was very interested in that concept, right? A guy that has a lot of experience telling stories and creating stories in different mediums, but never in a book format, right? And he tried to do this. And it was kind of like a pandemic book, so it was mostly kind of about living a cozy life, right? And I think it almost also kind of sparked a new genre, the cozy fantasy genre, which I just want to call slice of life fantasy because that's what it is, and Japan has had it forever. But I read this in May. It was my sister's graduation, or it was the week that my sister was graduating from college. I had just gotten home from my own, master's degree classes finishing, and we were about to celebrate my mom's birthday when my dad got a call from one of his brothers telling him that their dad was in the hospital and that it was probably not going to be long before grandpa passed away. And so dad immediately had to fly away to Mexico to visit, to make sure that he saw his dad one last time. And so I had to stay behind with my sister and my mom to make sure that their birthday and their graduation went well, and to make sure that my sister got to experience having one of her male family members at her graduation, and to help them drive there and stuff. And so I had to stay, and I had a really difficult time with the fact that me and my dad aren't religious. So how do you tell someone that isn't religious, that knows that you're not religious, that grandpa's in a better place, that death isn't the last thing left, that he will continue to exist in some way, right? It's not easy. It's very hard. And I had a difficult time finding the right words to express sympathy and grievance and comfort for my dad, right? And this doesn't really relate to Legends and Lattes because that's not what it's about. But I was in this really kind of weird situation, weird place, and there was a quiet moment during the time before we kind of had to keep going with life, and I started reading Legends and Lattes, and it managed to really calm down all of the difficulties that I was going through, and just helping me find a quiet, nice, wonderful place to be, which is drinking coffee and eating delicious pastries and just taking it in and relaxing and taking it slow. And so it was nice to have this book help guide me into a nice sense of relaxation or of comfort in a time where it felt very tumultuous to me, right? It felt very difficult. I didn't know what to do. I had to balance making sure my mom was happy on her birthday, even though it was kind of impossible because my dad was really hurting, and dealing with finding the right time to take my sister over to her graduation, and figuring out how to take my grandma there because she was visiting us as well. This is my mom's mom, and my dad's mom had passed away a long time ago. And then deal with the fact that my dad is gone, but I need to make sure that he's okay, so I have to call him and stuff. And so there was a lot of things going on, a lot of emotions flying through the air, and Legends and Lattes helped me ground myself and helped me find a place for myself in a segment in the day where I could sit down, relax, and kind of think through my emotions and help me center myself, which is really beautiful. I remember dealing with it and reading through some of the book, and then deciding that I needed to follow the example of the characters. And I made myself some coffee, and I found some donuts that we had left over from the morning, and I just sat down and enjoyed a bit of coffee with donuts, and then I get back to reading, and it helped me relax so much. So I really appreciate Kraken Rider Z and Legends and Lattes for very similar reasons, which is that they brought me comfort in a moment of difficulty, right? And maybe this doesn't mean that these books will continue to be my favorites going forward, but I will at least have a special place in my heart for them, and I will appreciate them for as long as I live, right? So yeah, moving on to number 3 is Gyun Saga. This one is actually more of an honorable mention, to be honest with you, because I wanted to make sure that I had one light novel, since this is replacing the light novel video that I usually do. But I also didn't feel that it was comparable to the other books, because this is only a sliver of the story compared to the other ones, which are full novels, right? So what I thought was best is to put it in the middle section and just explain myself a little bit. So Gyun Saga is Japan's take on heroic fantasy, or sword and sorcery, whatever you want to call it. And this character that we follow, Gyun, is very much a Conan the Barbarian-esque type character who happens to also be doing a escort mission for these children. So it's a little bit like Lone Wolf and Cub. And the story is a big inspiration on Berserk. I don't like Berserk particularly, I don't care too much, but I find that fans of Conan are most likely to appreciate Berserk. And I think that it's meaningful to show them where Berserk comes from. And so that's why I thought I should read this. I did a review for it. I enjoyed it. I thought that the style of writing was very interesting, very atmospheric. It does have a little bit of a echo of Robert E. Howard here and there, but it's pretty different regardless. And I think mostly that's because of translation, right? But I think that it deserves this place just because of the cultural interest that it creates in me. The idea that even Japan got around to doing heroic fantasy in the style of Robert E. Howard. And I think that's cool, right? So that's why it gets to be here. Number 2 is Cradle. I love this series. It reminds me of my childhood watching Naruto and a little bit of Pokemon as well. And I just love how this story unfolds. I like that it's divided into these major arcs and that each of these arcs represent like a development in the characters, right? Like the first part, the foundation section is about getting Linden to get to the place where he would be if he had been not unsold, right? The second section, Path of Gold, is about getting Linden beyond that. The third section is about getting to the highest levels possible on the world, and then the last section is about beyond that, right? Saving the universe at that point. And I love this very clear progression, and I also just really like the characters. Linden is a very funny contradiction. He's this massive, scary-looking motherfucker, and he's also a very, I don't think taciturn is the right word, but a very polite young man. He always apologizes. He always says gratitude. And he has a very meek personality, even though he's this massive, concerning, dark figure. And I love that. I think it's really funny. I really enjoy the side characters as well. Ethan is a very funny Jiraiya-esque kind of guy. Yeren is wonderful. I love her personality. Mercy as well. And I like the world building. I like Orthos, and I like the way that the system works. And it's kind of unclear, but also clear enough that you understand it. And it's a bit of a soft magic system, but certain times, kind of out of nowhere, it gets kind of really hard, really fast. And it's really enjoyable, and I really, really love it. So yeah, that's number 2. Number 1 is The Wandering Inn. And I think everyone that watches this channel more than once will know that that's my favorite novel of the year. This is the second of the progression fantasy type novels that I started reading this year. I think Cradle was the first one, or maybe I read them at the same time. I can't remember. But The Wandering Inn is like One Piece to me, or like Star Wars to me. It's a setting as much as it is a story. It's also not just about the world building. It's about the characters. It's about the expansiveness. It's about the slow burn and the creation of these living entities within story that you know are real even though they're not. And it's about Erin and her life in this crazy world, and the fact that she's just a wonderful human person, just a wonderful, beautiful kind of ideal that we should kind of strive to be like. And she's also really freaking stupid, and she's chaotic and dumb and wonderful. Like, I love Erin. I think Pirate Abba is an amazing writer, mostly because of her work with Erin. And I love the slow crawl to epic fantasy that The Wandering Inn has, because I would consider the Wandering Inn a slice of life fantasy, basically up until the end of book 6, when it finally becomes an epic fantasy in my eyes. And that crawl is very interesting. It reminds me a lot of One Piece, where One Piece doesn't really get epic until after you get to Alabasta. Before that, it's like 100 and something chapters of pretty easygoing, almost slice of lifey kind of vibes, right? And I love it. I think it's so wonderful. So, I mean, I don't want to say more because I feel like I've done like 12 hours of content on The Wandering Inn as well, beyond this. So I don't need to say more. But if you've never read The Wandering Inn, read it. It's one of the greatest stories ever told. I think it is, up there with One Piece and the Stormlight Archive and Star Wars, and I freaking love it. So there you go. That's top 5 novels or novel series in 2024. Let me know what your top 5 are. What have you read this year that really, really knocked your socks off? Let me know down in the comments. And thank you guys very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and see you guys later.